I'm back. There was a point within the last 2 weeks that I wasn't sure if this was going to happen again. But thanks to the hardworking and courageous firefighters, the hotshot crews, the airplane and helicopter teams, here I am safe and sound in my studio once again. The fire isn't completely out yet, but they have contained it a great deal. There's not as much smoke in the sky. They've started to open up roads that were previously closed. And I even have my paintings hanging on the walls once again. Things are looking really good right now, so a huge thanks to all of them and to all of you for keeping me, my family, and my community in your thoughts and prayers. You are all my heroes. Your love and kindness truly has made a big difference for me. So to start off with a big bang after that short break, I have something super special planned, so let's jump right in. It's been a while since I've painted on black watercolor paper. This is such a fun new technique to try, so let's see what we can come up with today. To go along with our black paper, I have here some gold metallic watercolor paints. Here's a sample of what they look like. These are slightly opaque and show up really well on black watercolor paper. Plus, they give a nice shimmer to the painting as well. And then I have two different brushes I'm going to be using today from my 5-piece Craftamo set, the number 6 round and the number 1 rigger. These are still in stock if you're interested, so I will put a link for those in the description of this video, along with links and information for any of the other products you see me using today. Now I do have an outline drawing that I'm going to be using for this piece today. This is a very whimsical flower with transparent features that I've based on a lily flower. Now you're welcome to try drawing something like this for yourself, or if you'd rather just jump right to the fun of painting, I will have this outline available in my Etsy shop as well, so you can just print that out and transfer it onto your watercolor paper. Of course, if you don't have black paper, you are welcome to paint this on white paper as well. Now, normally we can just trace these onto normal white watercolor paper using a light table, but black paper doesn't work quite that way. Here is my pencil outline drawing on the black paper. It might be a little bit hard to see, but to give you the gist of the idea, all I did was take my printed out copy of the lily and flip it over to the back side. Then using a pencil, I just colored over where all of those lines on that other side would be. You can use a light table to help you see that if you need to. This is just going to put graphite all over those sections, and then you can turn your paper back over, line it up onto your black watercolor paper, and then simply trace that outline. And this is going to transfer some of that graphite back onto your black paper so you'll be able to paint it. I'm not going to go into a ton of details on how to make this work right now, but I do have a full-length tutorial showing all the ins and outs and ways in which you can do this. I will also put that in the description of this video so you can go back and watch that. Now, like I say, this is pretty light against this black paper, so it might be a little bit hard to see. There might be some moments during this painting that we need to use our imagination and just freehand certain parts, so I do recommend keeping your outline close by so you can take a look at that if you need it as a reference. Now I'll just go ahead and tape my paper down with some artist tape really quickly, and then I think we can get started. I'll go ahead and pull out some water that we can use, as well as a paper towel. And as we get started painting these flowers, we're just going to be doing one section at a time, petal by petal, using the wet on wet technique. So I'll start off with the number 6 round brush and take a little bit of water and just paint in one of those flower petals using just water first. Then after the entire section is covered in a good amount of water, I'll take a little bit of this maybe more silverish color as sort of a base layer. If you don't have silver, you could just use white paint as well. I'm really not going to be using a lot of this though, just a small hint of it here and there to help our petals show up a little bit better against that black paper. So this is pretty watered down, and I'm not even going to cover the entire space. I still want some sections to feel dark or black, so just a few spots here and there need to have some strips of this silver color. You could even paint in some vein lines on the petal with it. Okay, I think that's good enough. I've got a little bit of white and a little bit of black. So while this is all still wet, I'm going to switch over to the #1 rigger, and I'll just pick one of these golden colors here. You can really try any gold or tint of gold color that you want to try. Just take a little bit of that paint straight from the palette, keep it dark and a little bit more opaque looking, and then using some of that paint, I'll begin painting lines along the outer edge of the petal to create sort of an outline of this a little bit. I'll also take a touch of this color and paint some thin vein lines throughout the petal as well. I'll probably focus a little bit more of this golden color both on the inner part of the petal at the very center of the flower, as well as the very tips of the petal. Now, if you've done transparent flower paintings with me before, this shouldn't be too different or difficult. So something that can happen here while you paint with this gold outline, if it's touching that wet section of the petal, it might start to blend or bleed a little bit. Whereas if it's touching the dry paper, you're going to get a more hard or crisp line. I usually try to have a little bit of both. With this piece, I kind of feel like it's not quite as critical. We really just kind of want to make sure that we're getting a nice outline shape of that petal so that it will stand out from the black paper. Once as you've kind of got the technique down though, you can continue filling in the rest of the petals. I do recommend skipping every other petal at the moment just to allow for a little bit of drying time before we start painting over the tops and having the petals overlap. I think one of the biggest key points to this painting is just to take it a little section at a time. This next petal being a little bit more whimsical, kind of has two separate tips. If you don't like that, you can just paint one. I thought it looked kind of cool. So I might paint these in separately just to keep them from blending together. But each petal is going to look a little bit different, and your painting is probably going to turn out differently than mine too, and that's okay. Something that's really fun about this piece, it might be a little bit hard to tell on camera, but because we're using these metallic paints, it really creates this fun, glittery shine to the painting when it hits the sunlight. In fact, you could probably use even different colors of metallic paints besides gold. I just thought gold stood out really well against the black, but you can do whatever you want. The gold seems to almost make it look like it's glowing or something, which I really like. But at this point, we're just going to go ahead and continue painting in these petals one at a time in the same way. So sit back and just enjoy that painting process. I hope you are enjoying the tutorial so far. If you're finding my painting and teaching style fun and helpful, I do hope you'll subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss out on any of my new and upcoming weekly tutorials. And like I say, you might get to a point where some of your lines are going to be a little bit hard to see on this black paper, but I do have my outline sitting right here that I can pull out and refer to it if I need to. I'm not even going to follow all of these lines exactly, and that's not really a big deal either. This is mostly just to be used as a guide, but you might have to use your artistic, creative minds to fill in those gaps if we need to. Okay, we've got these first 3 petals done. Now I'm going to let these dry before we start painting in those overlapping petals on top of them. But while we wait, we can continue on and maybe paint in the base of the flower next, along with the stem and the leaves. The good news is that we're going to be again painting these in a very similar way, starting out with maybe some water first, adding just a touch of silver to give it a little bit of color, but again, not filling the entire space with that. And then we'll use some nice thin strips of gold along the outer lines to really make it pop off the page. It might even be a fun idea to try adding some more concentrated amounts of the gold off to one side of these things just to make it seem like there's a light source actually hitting one side compared to the other. While I'm adding in the gold accents on this leaf here, I might paint in some nice thin gold vein lines among the leaf to create a little bit of extra detail. Okay, well done. We really are making a lot of progress here. I think my petals up above are completely dry now, so I'm going to go ahead and paint in the overlapping petals on top, again in the same way as before. I am finding it's a little bit hard to see some of those pencil lines and where I need to paint, especially where the paint is already on the page. But again, we can pull out our outline drawing and just freehand in these petals into this space in sort of a similar shape or form, but again, it doesn't have to be exact. Now, I've done a lot of transparent painting techniques with watercolor, and I found that different paints or even paper brands can sometimes work better or worse with this transparent technique. I'm noticing here that as I'm painting this water layer over the top of this petal, it's actually starting to reactivate that paint, and it's sort of smearing some of those crisp lines. So at the moment, I'm just going to continue on and paint in this petal, and later I'll come back in and touch up those smeared lines a little bit better. So maybe on the next petal, I'll try something a little bit different just so we don't mess those lines up quite as much. Okay, so in an attempt to not smear any of the paint that's already on the page here, as I'm doing this next petal, I think I'll just paint the water layer in the area where there isn't any paint and sort of go around those petals that are already on the page. So with this one, I can keep the silver layer within that wet area, and then as I start adding in the gold on the outer sections, I can paint along the full length of the petal, creating more of a crisp line in some of these spaces where it's dry and overlapping those other petals. My hope is that we'll still get a nice outline of the petal shape without smearing those petals already on the page. I actually think that turned out pretty good. I did end up with a nice crisp line on the petal, and it's also showing and standing out really well. So I'm going to do that same technique on the very last petal down here too. Now, once as the entire painting is dry, I'm going to come back into this petal that got smeared earlier and just touch up those lines a little bit with some extra gold paint. Okay, that looks a lot better. So moving on, we only have one more thing left to do here, and that is to paint in the stamen area of the flower. And I might try a slightly different hue or tint of gold for this, just so it stands out a little bit from the rest of the flower. This one's a slightly darker color of gold. I didn't realize it at the moment, but now that I'm looking at it, that color is off of my screenshot. So I do apologize for that, but I'll just take some of that darker gold in a nice concentrated amount and paint in the lines of the stamen first, and then add in the top parts of them as well, basically just painting in the outline shape for it for now. All right, pretty good. To give the tops of these just a little bit of extra dimension, I'm just going to take a little bit of water in my bristles and rub or smear a tiny bit of that paint right down at the base of these to give it a little bit of shadow, just so it's not quite so flat looking. All right, that's much better. Now, I kind of like that touch of darker gold as an accent, so I might even just take a little bit more of that and just add a touch here and there amongst the flower just to create a little bit of variety and maybe even help some of the areas stand out a little bit better. Now, this doesn't need to cover everything. We only need a hint of it occasionally. Okay, well done. Believe it or not, that is actually all there is to this painting. This is extremely unique. I don't think I've ever painted anything quite like this before, but I really like how it turned out. It's very different, and it was also fun to do. I think this is a piece that is going to wow your family and friends. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you had some fun and maybe even learned something new. If you did enjoy this tutorial, I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel so I can continue to help you discover your artistic side.